Hey there, I'm Chelsea,
And I'm Nick.
and you're listening to the Forever Changed podcast.
On this podcast, you can expect to hear real conversations from Chelsea and I about how we have been forever changed by Jesus and how you can be too. We're so glad that you're here, and thank you for spending some time with us. We hope you enjoy. Well, hey there, welcome back to Forever Changed podcast. My name is Nick, here with Chelsea. Welcome into our 5-part series on the things that we wish we knew before we got married. And today's topic is, I think it's rather different. I think a lot of people have guesses and they have presumptions of things that, they figure one might say in this kind of conversation. But I think today's will be a bit different for all of us.
Right. And our book, Marriage Minded, covers a lot of these topics that we don't want to just dive into in a podcast. We want this to be supplementary, like extra things that you wish you would have known, because all of the things that we said in that book we think are super vital, but also I think to have a conversation around it is incredible too, because you get to kind of put some like verbiage behind how this will play out in your relationship. And so, yeah, Nick and I were kind of talking about what this could look like for our first conversation of 5 conversations that we wish we had before we got married. And we came up with this topic, and it really was kind of birthed out of Nick's idea, but I think we both agree that it's incredibly vital.
Yeah, and so the premise of today's deep dive, I guess, that we're going to spend in our time together is really talking about the concept of how many people are kind of creating imagery or mindsets or even fantasies and fairy tales about what married life will look like on the other side of the wedding day. And I can absolutely see why this would happen. We have a natural tendency as human beings to try to imagine what the future is going to look like in any regard, what that new job will look like, what that new dog that we add to the family, how that dynamic will change. Like for us when we had Hudson, how bringing a child into our home, what that will look like in the grand scheme of our home. But I don't think that this is all bad. I think that there's a lot of great that can come out of maybe birthing some expectations in your mind. But really what I want to talk about today is creating these false narratives and these false situations and these false realities in our minds, and then passing off that unspoken reality onto the person that you might be marrying. And the reason that we felt it was important to have this conversation here in this 5-part series was because this was something we kind of got ourselves into. And by we, I mean me. So that's why I just thought it was a really great idea to start with this today. And so, Chelsea, why don't you talk to us a little bit about maybe how this looked for you on the other side of it? So for me, I think I had a lot of these preconceived notions going into marriage, but how did that look and come off for you? And really, when did you begin to notice that, okay, maybe Nick has some things that he's expecting or some things that he's thinking that maybe just aren't aligned with maybe what I was thinking or with, our marriage in general?
Yeah, I think a lot of the behavior that maybe we expected out of one another stemmed from how we were raised and grew up, what we saw, what we were exposed to, and naturally just repeating what we had seen in our home. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's just more of what we're like conditioned to do as humans is we repeat behavior that we're often surrounded by. And so I think the way that came to be or manifested in our relationship was just more of feeling like we had even like uncommunicated expectations around the roles of being like a man and a woman in the house, I think, because certain things you didn't mind doing, like cooking, and I had never seen that growing up where like the man primarily did a lot of the cooking in the home, and it's not that, that's supposed to be a woman's job, but my mom cooked a lot in the home, and I think it was like a weird pride thing for me to feel like, no, like I need to learn how to do this and be like the one that was like cooking in the home, but you just really enjoyed it and you also believe that you're a better cook, which you are.
Subtly.
And so it's okay to be honest about that. And I'm like getting better whenever I do cook. I think realizing now that you enjoy a good recipe and that you love to follow directions helps me know that you'll respect the thing that I cook and love it even more if I follow a recipe. But I just never really saw my mom too much like follow recipes, or she just like cooked by what she thought was good. And like a lot of times it came out great and sometimes like not incredibly great, but it always was like pretty good. But you coming from the South, you were around a lot of really good, like we're going to go to the extreme, making things from scratch. It's going to be amazing. And me coming from the Midwest, like food wasn't really something that we like, I guess, dined around or like made such a big experience. And so I think that's just probably like one example of like stripping even the woman man role from what maybe traditionally you would believe or think about when it comes to like how a woman or a man is going to function in the home. I think it's very seasonal too. Like when we first got married, you and I love to like cook together in the kitchen, but now that we're parents, like somebody has to work
Totally.
with Hudson and you get him ready for the bed and all of that. And so it's like either you're cooking or I'm cooking, or you're taking care of Hudson or I'm taking care of Hudson. So
Yeah.
I think it's like a give and take. And so it's going to look different. But I think with this example in mind, there's a lot of these uncommunicated expectations that you may not even realize that you have or that you're carrying into a marriage until you actually get married. And so there's some things that you can prepare for, and then there's other things that you just have to know in the back of your mind. When I experience maybe frustration or anger or hurt build up, there's probably something that, like a need I'm trying to meet through my spouse that maybe they can meet, or it's a need that only can be met by God and that you're trying so hard to get met by a person and it's just leading to frustration. So I think it's just good to know like these things are going to inevitably come up, but having a heart of accepting change and working with it like is huge. And I think that's like the biggest point that I would say is just be willing.
Yeah, that's good. I think one of the reasons that we thought this was really important is because it's one of the pain points I think a lot of people have, but just don't know it. So what that often looks like is somebody will pull me aside at an event I'm speaking at, or somebody will send Chelsea a message. And honestly, a lot of that kind of feedback is really what went into birthing the book. But a lot of, those conversations tend to be like, hey, I got with this girl or I got with this guy and I thought. That's usually the two words you always end up hearing at some point. I thought. And you know the rest. I thought it was going to look like this, or sometimes it's I never thought that this would happen, or I thought that she was going to help me, achieve this, or that he was going to be this kind of guy for me. And man, if I could just like help you to realize that assuming the other person knows your preliminary thoughts and expectations, they don't. Let me free them up and let me free you up. They do not. There is no possible way for that person to know the reality that you have created in your mind about what that relationship will look like, whether it's a dating relationship, an engagement relationship, a married relationship, really wherever you find yourself. Like this is applicable, honestly, to, I would say, all four stages of singleness, dating, engagement, and marriage. I think it's really like, because the single person is thinking, oh man, this is how my life will transform from being single to dating. This is how much things will, change. And this is what I'll be doing on my Friday nights. And this is, kind of how life will look. And when it doesn't look like that, or maybe when something is, array or something's not right, then we're like, oh man, they must not be the one. They must not be the right person for me, because my frame of reference told me, my expectations that I built up in my head told me that if it's right, this is what it should look like. And when it doesn't look like that, we just tend to throw the relationship out and just say, it wasn't what I thought it would be. Now, there are some scenarios where
it's good to
when
have.
it's, yeah, exactly. There are some scenarios where I think it's common sense. I think it's biblical worldview sense, having a good understanding of what the Bible says and what God thinks, and seeing that, okay, if there's like big character issues that are misaligned, or if there's integrity issues that are misaligned, okay, that's kind of a different podcast for a different time. But if it's just small stuff like, hey,
Yeah.
I thought Chelsea was going to cook all the time, and I cook all the time, which I never thought that, by the way. I honestly really love cooking. And that's just kind of the dynamic of our home. That's just one example. Chelsea has told me numerous times that she loves doing laundry. And honestly, it blesses me. And I'm totally kidding.
Really? I'm like,
Chelsea's
when did I say that?
This is a first for me. No,
But it is something that I do out of love for our family, and that it has to get done.
Praise God.
You don't have to enjoy every single thing that you do, but I am learning to try to enjoy the things that are even that I haven't enjoyed in the past. Finding something that I enjoy doing while doing things that I don't necessarily enjoy doing.
Yeah.
But
do you think a lot of people run into, just your personal take, it's just us girls here. In your personal take, do you think a lot of young men, young women run into this a lot, where they have these preconceived notions that they carry into a relationship of any sort, and then it ends up biting them later on because maybe it didn't look like what they thought it would?
yeah, I think it's honestly a constant conversation, because even you and I still have to keep open dialogue around when dynamics shift, like you become parents or you move away from home or your finances change. Like, those conversations are always being had, but it's not just we're married now, so we need to go over all these like questions and make sure we're on the same page. It's a constant checking in, making sure there's no resentment there, because I think what a lot of times can happen, and we've experienced this, is we can end up holding resentment towards one another when there is something that we're expecting from each other, but is not being met or not communicated because it is just assumed, or you think that the other person is a mind reader. And I'll be honest, like, especially as a woman, whenever I'm feeling things so intensely at different periods throughout the month, like that swings too. Like, it can feel like, wow, my husband's out to get me because he didn't do this. And I'm like, where am I going with this line of thought? Like, it just doesn't make sense logically. But like, I think also feeling respected too in those moments where I am a little, like, I guess you could say weaker in my vulnerable, just being met with love and understanding of like, I can see like you're struggling with this right now, but like committed to walking through it together and finding mutual understanding, even when there is heightened emotions. That's when I think you can find a lot of just like even trust being built in those moments. But all of these things aren't going to be solved or communicated about overnight. It's like
I was
a
exactly
total
about to say that. Yeah, this
transforming,
is a lot.
like step-by-step daily thing. And realizing too that the enemy doesn't like committed, thriving relationships and marriages, especially relationships that are headed towards marriage. And you do get married. If he can divide you in any way, he's going to, even through the way that you think about each other. And so just be aware that like our battle is not flesh and blood. Like my battle is never against my husband.
Yeah. Our battle's not each other.
It is literal spiritual forces at work.
Right.
And there is an enemy that does not want us to be unified. And so just also being aware that that's on the table. That's always something to be praying into, pressing into, and that the Lord wants even more so us to just love him and enjoy each other. And I think that's where it can always stand, is on that foundation.
Hey friends, if you're enjoying this podcast so far and you have not yet ordered your copy of Marriage Minded, we believe because you're listening to this episode, you would really enjoy and gain insight and wisdom from that book. Nick and I went back and forth in each and every chapter, sharing from our experience and also wisdom from older couples, scripture, and collective advice on how exactly you can know that you're with the one. So it's 10 ways to know that you have found the one. And that phrase can sound a little bit like, oh, there's certainly only one person out there for me, but that's not what we're getting at. What we're getting at is 10 biblical principles and ways to know that you are walking in the path that God has designed for you in your relationship. So if you've not yet ordered it, or if you've already ordered it, hopefully these podcasts go along with all the things that you're learning there, and it just kind of complements more of what you're learning. So we hope you're blessed by it, and thank you for supporting our podcast.
I think one of the other things pertaining to this conversation that we've run into is that you alluded to it. You alluded to several different things that I wanted to touch on. But one of the things that you alluded to was that this is not an overnight thing.
Yeah.
So if you wake up tomorrow and you want to make some implementive changes to maybe your relationship, have a conversation together, or maybe you're single right now and you just kind of want to understand some of the preliminary things going into a relationship that would benefit you and the other person greatly.
Yeah.
Don't feel like you're going to master this in a week. I mean, you're hearing over half a decade's worth of kind of honestly just really real of failures, mess ups, jack ups, and us trying to fix it and, figure out, okay, what went wrong? How can we get it right the next time? Oh, we messed it up again. Okay, how can we get it right the next time? Oh, so a lot of that, I mean, that's really real. Like you're going to fall down, you're going to mess up, you're going to blow it. And I mean, really a lot of it's asking for forgiveness and making those small incremental adjustments that over time yield, amazing results. And so honestly, it's just like working out. I mean, Chelsea finally got me back into the gym like 2 weeks ago.
It feels like a constant conversation.
And so day one, I go back and we do chest and triceps. Then the next day we do, what do we do? Biceps and back. And then yesterday we did legs.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a break in between the legs and all of the arms and chest too.
There was indeed.
I was like, Nick, we got to get back.
I needed about a week to prepare myself. You know what I mean? But yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention that I thought was really good, you sort of alluded to it but didn't say this verbatim, is that, in my opinion, I think that you would agree, is that maintaining a healthy, thriving relationship takes work. It takes effort. It takes intentionality. A lot of people will often say that following Jesus doesn't take work, and I understand what they mean by that. It's like the Spirit is alive in me, which naturally, creates a life and a heart in me that desires to follow Jesus. It's not something I'm laboring to do. It's more so an inward changing that has now, really created me to follow him. And so I understand that point of view, but I think that when we carry that point of view into relationships, we can kind of get ourselves into a little bit of a mess, and that my relationship isn't going to take work. It's naturally going to be abundant, but nothing on this side of eternity really works like that. Cars don't work like that. Gardens don't work like that. And I don't think marriages or dating relationships or engagement or honestly being a healthy single person works like that. I think it takes soul work. I think it takes working on the inner man or the inner woman. and not in a way of like you're laboring towards God or you're laboring for some, status or place to get to where everything works out well for you. But I think it takes working through having old conversations a lot, because every day for us looks a little bit different. And if I wake up on a Tuesday and I have a thought in my mind of what that day is going to look like, and I'm married to that idea of what that day will look like, but Chelsea may have something that she needs to do or something that, she was thinking about. Like, am I humble enough to maybe allow a few of the things that were on my list to move off so that she can do what she needs? So there's a lot of those conversations that will have to be had, and honestly a lot of work that will need to be put in. And it's not work one time or work 3 summers ago or anything like that. I mean, it's a consistent work and labor and effort, as the Bible says, would yield a harvest in due time. And it's a very fruitful labor. I think it's a blessing to be able to be hand in hand with a partner and to work on that marriage and to work on that relationship with one another. That's another thing I'll say, is you're never working alone in the context of relationship. You're always working together. So I'm never against Chelsea. She's never against me, but we are together in this in every facet. And so if you are kind of finding yourself in that place, okay, maybe we need to have some conversations. Maybe there's some stuff that we need to work on. I would say changing that language and that reality that you've maybe created in your mind of changing that to we.
Yeah, that's good. One of the, I feel like, most simple examples I could give of like your relationship, you were just talking about your relationship with Jesus and kind of how it parallels to work in a relationship. I think of a lot of people are kind of mindlessly consuming a lot on, like, even online on our phones, and how that can affect our relationships, but also like it's an active work to like shut out a lot of the world a lot of times, because the world is so distracting that as much as it can seem like such a little thing to even like take breaks from listening to so much outside noise, a lot of times God will call us even into times of being more quiet so he can become loud. And I think that is something that I've experienced this past year, where being able to like discern what he's trying to say more so has been directly correlated to the work that it's taken to filter out certain voices in my life. And so even in your relationship with like the person that you love or the person that you will soon love, potentially, like recognizing their voice and their opinions and like everything that they're saying to you, as it holds weight, it holds value, and honoring them, respecting the things that they say, and like undivided attention. Like that just shows that you really care about that person so much. So thinking of our relationship with the Lord parallel to relationships, I think that's probably a really real life, like realistic example of work in a relationship correlated to relationship with God, but it doesn't feel like work. It feels more like quieting out noise.
Yeah, I agree with that. And what tends to happen a lot of times is in relationships and singleness and engagement, even, many people become dependent on the other person or on a person in general to fill a void that they have. And so they seek it in the next relationship or the next guy or the next girl or the next whatever. Yeah. And the cycle just continues on and on and on and on. And the reason, going full circle here, the reason I think that it continues in a perpetual cycle, just one big turning circle, is because that person, whoever they are, whoever the person is going from one guy or one girl to the next, is because they have in their mind, this is what a relationship should be like. This is what it should look like. This is the reality that will exist for me in the right relationship. And when it doesn't look like what they thought it would, they break it off. And what do? Go right to the next person until they find someone suitable or close enough to that reality that they've created in their mind, while never taking into account that kind of mindset might not be a good one, or it might not be suitable to finding the right person. I think that it's good to hold morals and it's good to hold character qualities in mind when you're dating and thinking of the person that you'll spend your life with, but to have an unchecked false narrative of reality that this is what it will be like. And until it is, I'm just going to keep dumping people and getting with new people and dumping people and getting with a new person. That's just going to leave you heartbroken and honestly in a really big mess. So I think you've learned that. I think I've learned that. I think that people we know have learned that / are learning that as time goes. And yeah, this is just honestly one of the biggest trip ups that we see people make. It's one of the things that we did not mention a lot about in the book, and that you can obviously find here on the podcast. And I think that this was a really beneficial conversation to have for conversation number 1 of our 5 conversations that we'll have. And I'm looking forward to the other 4. I think that they're going to be really incredible. And I hope that you will stick with us for the journey as well.
Yeah, for sure. I'll leave y'all with one last thought. What you were saying about creating versions in your mind, even when you're single, and like trying to, I guess, fabricate the perfect human before you even get a relationship with them, or, hopping back and forth. A lot of times I'll look at the people around me that are doing that, and even in myself before you and I got married, I noticed that I was trying to get the 4 core needs met. So the 4 core needs, if you're unfamiliar, are security, worth, love, and acceptance. So a lot of things and the behaviors that we have can often be boiled down to, what need am I trying to be met? Am I feeling unworthy right now? Unworthy of somebody's affection, attention? Am I feeling insecure in my finances, insecure in my relationship? Do I feel like I'm not adequate?
Or possessions.
It could,
or whatever, because
right, it could be so many different things. And a lot of those needs, and like the ones that come up a lot more, have to do with a lot of unresolved like hurts maybe that you have from the past. But oftentimes people get in relationships and they break up a lot because they have created this image in their mind. But also we think that relationships are going to solve a puzzle that is incomplete.
Yeah.
That we're incomplete because we're single, or we're incomplete because
we're not married by this age.
Right, whatever the case may be. And even the lie that married people believe, that I'm not going to be okay if my spouse dies, or I'm not going to be okay if I'm somehow unmarried. I'm just as valuable unmarried as I am with you. And even I can see how some people can take that statement as, if we're more effective together, married, we should get married.
Yeah.
But sometimes that mindset can kind of be bad in some ways if you don't first even recognize that I have so much value and worth just by myself. I can make an eternal impact, even more so in some ways if I didn't get married. So just like kind of keeping that perspective is really huge, because we don't ever want you guys to believe that you have more worth, value, security, identity if you are with another person, because that's a lie. But just recognizing like it is healthy and it's a great desire to be with another person and to pursue godly marriage, but it does not complete us. Mm-hmm. And
it's not the cure-all for your problems that you currently have. I'll tell you that. If anything, this is what I think it was in premarital counseling, or just a friend, or maybe a sermon. I don't know. But a relationship with someone else who loves the Lord will magnify your junk. It will not diminish it. They will not fix those problems. It will make them much easier to see. And you'll be forced to reckon with them and to deal with them. And that's also a part that I don't think is discussed enough. Is, are you really ready to deal with that inward stuff in your heart, deal with the secrets, deal with the trauma that you've hidden for a long time, and bring that to light and work through it? And, in order to have a healthy marriage and relationship, that's what you have to do. And
There's so much grace.
there is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank God for grace. And there's so much still to learn. There's so much that you and I still have to learn.
Yeah.
And we're all on a journey. And like you said, God has so much grace and he lavishes that daily. And his mercies are new every day. So even if you feel like you've blown it, whether it was a year ago, a month ago, this week, whatever it was, just know that his grace is still for you. He is for you. And that there's nothing that you can do to make him love you any less.
Yeah. Well, I know we've taken enough of your time, so we will kindly sign off. But we're so excited for the rest of the 4 conversations, and I'm grateful we got to have this conversation together.
Yeah, he's kind of like a little mouse.
This is kind of fun because we normally don't use these mics in this way. We used to have those big, y'all know, like the big finicky, like mic arm things. And so now we're back on these little stands.
Yep. Well, hey, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
See ya.
Hold on.